Let's start off with Varka's expedition. The purpose of such, being related to a secret, from days long past, leading to Varka, taking most of the nights, and traveling north. Then at some point, crossing paths with the Fatui harbinger, known as the captain, resulting in a standoff. Unfazed by the tensions rising, with weapon in hand, Varka approached the Fatui harbinger. After the two exchanged words, they came to an understanding, and an alliance was formed. This lasted until the captain was given new orders to head to Natlan. Although, when the knights first encountered the Fatui forces, Varka stated that he would have enjoyed a duel against the captain, but he must have deemed it as inappropriate due to their unique circumstances. Could a duel against Capitano be the potential reason behind Varka's presence in Natlan? But how could this situation be any less appropriate than the first encounter? Put simply, I think Varka's presence in Natlan would be of a greater importance than a duel, leaving us with the next viable reason, being the expedition. This all depends on the purpose, and the final objective. Whether it's someplace or something, it would have to be the reason behind a change in direction. But what I think is more likely, is Varka continuing further up north, into Snezhnaya. As for my own speculation, the expedition may tie into the future plot of Fontaine. That might be in relation to a person, rather than a place. With this there is room for the expedition to suddenly change course to Natlan. Even so, I have my doubts. Without diving too far into my speculation, it seems like the current location of the expedition is between Snezhnaya and Mondstadt. In correspondence with Natlan's location, we can guess that it's either west of Fontaine, or southwest of Sumeru, across the desert. Either way, Natlan is likely in the opposite direction. So to suddenly change course, could only mean the final objective isn't a single place or person, in which case the expedition could end up in Natlan. However, if the knights were to go to Natlan, I don't think it would be to rally behind the Fatui. Instead, it is more likely to be in opposition of each other, because the knights stepping foot in Natlan would surely be seen as a declaration of war, especially from the Tsaritsas' perspective, possibly resulting in a conflict between Mondstadt and Snezhnaya. This would fit Natlan's theme of war, but I can't see the story putting focus on another region as collateral damage. Either way, whether I'm right or wrong about the direction of the story, I expect it to be self-contained, with the outcome being resolved by a new character directly tied to that region, as every region seems to have that pattern. So as far as the knights going to Natlan, I think it is less likely than the expedition continuing north, or coming to an end in Fontaine. For argument's sake, let's entertain the idea that the expedition has nothing to do with Natlan. So why might Varka head there? For nothing more than a duel? Which, when we compare this to a similar situation, where Varka first came in contact with the Fatui, he suggested then that it wasn't right due to the unique circumstances. So I could only imagine Varka's opinion of going to Natlan, currently in an all-out war, for a simple duel. So if the expedition isn't involved, and a duel being deemed inappropriate, what other reason might Varka have for going to Natlan? Despite being a renowned figure, little is known about him. We have an idea of his character, being jovial and implied to value strength, with his passion to spar, train and duel. What's more, is his frequent expeditions, and reluctancy to do any desk work. But there is one hint to his past. Something that is said by Kaya is that Varka brought trouble to those around him, on his path to becoming a living legend. And I began to question, what if Varka's past doesn't begin in Mondstadt, but instead somewhere else, like Natlan? Is there any possibility for Varka to be a native of Natlan? If so, what could be the reason behind his residency in Mondstadt? Especially when so few natives are seen outside from their homeland, besides the Nessus tribe, the children of Murata. So if Varka originates from Natlan, what might be the reason for him ending up elsewhere? There might be a potential clue in the description of the talking stick, where we learn of a man that could be described as troublesome, named Tenok, who caused so much trouble that each of the major tribes partitioned the Pyro Archon for his expulsion. But in the end, Tenok remained in his homeland, avoiding being sent into exile. Could Varka's past mirror Tenok's? But not nearly as fortunate, resulting in his expulsion from Natlan? As such, Varka would not have abandoned his old ways. Instead, he would travel across Teyvat, engaging in fights and battles against strong opponents. Until one day he settled in Mondstadt, came across Andrius and became the Knight of Boreas. Then later obtained the highest position in the Knights of Favonius, becoming the Grand Master and a beloved figure. If this was his truth, it could explain why he values strength, as well as his drive to fight. This could also be the reason behind him seemingly never remaining in Mondstadt for long. Either due to the adventures in his youth or, despite his success, he secretly misses his homeland, never truly feeling at home. Even if this is a possibility, how could Varka become involved without further consequences? I can only think of one reason behind his presence in Natlan. That being strictly personal, unrelated to the Knights of Favonius. Meaning Varka would have to go completely alone, giving the Fatui and the Saritsa one single target that does not represent the interest of Mondstadt. Which is why I think for one, the expedition needs to conclude before Natlan picks off. 2. Varka has to have some deeper connection to Natlan, besides the implied duel between him and the captain. Being a native gives him more incentive to involve himself, opposed to an outsider. Having a personal reason behind his involvement gives more weight to Varka's role in Natlan. Speaking of roles, he might directly accompany us, as we traverse the war-torn lands. But I am more interested in how he will be introduced into the story. Will he just casually stroll in with a conversation, or will his entrance come with his fight against Capitano? What could lead to this point? Very little is known about Capitano's war in Natlan. What little we do know, is that, he threw his hat into the ring of war, implying that he is engaged in Natlan's conflict. What if Capitano's exploits in the war begin to spread far throughout Teyvat? As a war like never seen before, maybe even calling similarities to Kenraya's destruction. Such a thing might cause even Varka, an outcast, to become involved. Now I'm in the belief that Murata is not dead, but rather inactive for some unknown reason, yet to be revealed to us. Likely in relation to the Travail story trailer. So similarly to Zhongli and Venti, she might be an incognito, but out of touch with her people. Which, if Venti's mention of Archon's strength is anything to go by, could only mean Murata is a shell of her former self. As a forgotten Archon, she would be significantly weaker. Versus a Fatui harbinger, said to be a normal man, strong enough to challenge the gods. Even more so, is the mystery behind his identity, and what that might entail for Natlan's story. Needless to say, the captain will likely have a transformation, but what that might be, is nothing more than speculation and theories. As for a battle between the two, Capitano might not only defeat the Pyro Archon but also the Traveler. This might even give us an idea of his strength and the gap between ourselves and the Fatui Harbinger. If by chance, the captain is the Bloodstained Knight, acting as a double agent within the Fatui, but only devoted to the Abyss, I don't think he would stop with simply defeating the Pyro Archon, who probably isn't even in possession of the Gnosis. He might still intend on finishing her off, alongside the Traveler. This could be the first instance of him showing his true identity, and going for the finishing blow. Varka would then make his entrance, stopping the captain. The two would have their duel, ending in a draw. Capitano would then leave. After this, Varka and the gang would regroup, taking a break. Murata might reveal more of Natlan's history and the direction of the story. At some point I believe we will go to Mer Jabari. My theory is Murata will have a successor, and the purpose of us going there is to revive them. Varka would likely directly aid us in our journey in Natlan. Plus, I do think they would utilize Varka more than just for half of a region's story. As always, the probability of this actually happening is very low. I'm more convinced that they will take another direction with Varka and Natlan's plot. I will be surprised if I'm even partially right. Just for fun, I guess I can go into my hopes and expectations for Natlan. Regarding not only Varka, but Murata, Xbalanque and the successors if there is one, as well as other themes and locations. As someone who really enjoys the landscapes in Genshin, I am really looking forward to how they might interpret Africa as well as Mesoamerica in Genshin. The flat plains, the rolling grasslands, mountains and volcanoes. There is so much unique and beautiful scenery in Africa, and I hope to see them all in Natlan. I'm also curious about the major tribes, and their designs. Learning more about the companions, the roaming dragons, as well as the central city. That I imagine to be under Xbalanque's leadership. The captain's war, and whether or not he's just a participant or a conqueror, causing chaos and destruction. This is a big if, but an Archon versus Archon fight. Pyro versus Cryo. How will Hoyoverse handle Capitano? Is he some unknown man or the bloodstained knight? Also, before I move on to Natlan's gimmick and kits. Is Capitano's eyes described to be uncanny blue? This could be the result of whatever gave him life after death. Especially, if we focus on the uncanny part. And now I will begin to brainstorm gimmicks and kits. So Natlan is the nation of war, and their moniker is likely adopted from the dragons. The victor shall burn bright, while the loser must turn to ash. What if the gimmick for Natlan characters is a performance in battle? A certain requirement for buffs. Like a warrior's pride. Similar to a Viking's fearlessness of death, even welcoming it. Wanting nothing more than a glorious death in combat. As well as having some form of shame for growing old without any accomplishments. Part of this could be attributed to what Burkina said in the talking stick. So what if Natlan's characters receive buffs for both dealing damage as well as taking it? Basically you are rewarded for your efforts in combat. And Murata's kit will contribute to a warrior's pride. So being the Archon, she will likely have both a supportive and DPS role. That should stand apart from the other Archons, since she's the god of war. This should go without saying, but she uses a claymore. Her skill is a taunt. But unlike any other, this sends enemies into a frenzy, causing them to charge relentlessly, while making them hard to knock back, but still susceptible to crowd control. Her skill would also provide buffs for the active character, being poise, and attack speed. Her skill gives only her invincibility. So for a short period of time she can't take damage. This might also be like a visual cue with Pyro infusion. So when Pyro runs out, so does the invincibility. As for her burst, this would work two ways. On field and off field. When Murata is on field, her burst changes her attack animation. When she does damage, it provides a set amount of party-wide healing in exchange for her own health. In this state, she will not take damage outside from the HP cost for attacking, which will not go past 1. Off-field, as the active character takes damage, Murata will provide buffs. Should the active character reach 1 HP, they will be restored to full health. Murata's passive. When she loses HP, her crit damage increases, depending on the percentage of health she's at. So the incentive is to fight fearlessly, with no regards for death, only glory. Xbalanque's kit. Pyro Polearm. Their playstyle fits a sacrificial god. Xbalanque's burst is like Nouvellette's charge. But instead, it's a satellite beam from above, or a massive pyro tornado with crowd control. Either of which doing continuous pyro damage. This will be the charge attack, but counts as a burst. So as you hold down, the damage multiplies, in exchange for the party's health. While doing damage, Xbalanque heals only themselves. Their skill. They do a quick successions of strikes with a scythe doing pyro damage. This marks enemies. When hitting a marked enemy, you will heal off-field party members. But the active character doesn't get any heals. Next up is Varka, and being that he is the main topic, I guess I'll update my old kit's idea. If he's a native of Natlan, the rules should apply to him. So taking damage buffs him. Maybe Natlan natives enter a combat state unique only to them. An emo claymore user. Varka's normals are powerful one-handed strikes, but his first attack is a teleport. His charge is him charging forward, tanking damage. Skill is a stance change. While in this stance, Varka's normal attacks, if timed, will parry incoming attacks with anemo slashes, while also doing physical damage, depending on the range. Charged attacks teleports Varka past the target, following after as cuts in space that create a pull for enemies. When Varka causes swirl reaction, a wolf is summoned. He can have 2 wolves present at a time. Wolves, depending on the swirl reaction, provide buffs to the active character. Electro, attack speed. Pyro, damage increase. Cryo, crit rate. Hydro, increases healing received. Varka's burst, the power related to being a Knight of Boreas. Maybe a transformation or change in his playstyle. If Andrea's power is related to the Moon Sisters, then I'd hope to see that in Varka's burst. Last but not least is the maybe successor of Murata, the future Pyro Archon. Basically Pyro Hazo. Let's just for name's sake call him Burkina. Pyro Catalyst. Normal attacks are a barrage of punches and kicks, while his charge attack is him gathering power, pushing back enemies while doing burn damage. Skill is for crowd control, with a tap and hold option. He charges up power, pulling in enemies regardless of size, then explodes with a burst of energy. Burkina's burst. He puts all his power into his fist and punches the ground, sending out a shockwave. When Burkina takes damage, his crit stats increase. When Burkina recovers HP, he gets a damage increase, depending on the percentage of health recovered. 50% to full health. 100% increase in damage. 1% to full health. 200% damage increase. Passive. Should Burkina's HP reach 1, he will enter a state of invincibility for a short period of time, as well as increasing his attack speed and movement. Oh, and he doesn't actually have a running animation. Instead it's him flying. He can't ascend or descend, but he's not in contact with the ground. Sprinting does pyro damage. Short dashes are flash steps, so he can eliminate any distance between himself and the target. His sprint is super fast. He's basically like a supercar for free roam. He might not be able to fly from Liyue to Inazuma, but with the distance and speed, he could clear 10 times the distance of other characters full sprint. As for the Doom posting about Natlan's skin color, we got Uru Village for reference, among other dark complexion NCPs. I was going to dive more into the caste system and how it affected the culture, back then as well as today, but that's a little too political. Anyway, I'm for diversity, never against it. This community is the most welcoming and has the most diverse group of people, from different backgrounds, races, sexual orientation, and age. So I hope no one entertains any of that nonsense against diversity. Nor am I saying Genshin should pander or force diversity, but when it fits, why shouldn't they? But again, not trying to be political, so let's leave it at that. Anyway, hope you have a good day, and until next time, peace.